Hello everyone. So somehow it's already the middle of December and next week is Christmas and then the week after that is New Year's and I don't know how that happened. So I planned on doing a top 10 books of the year list of just my favorites and I was going to do it in two parts so I had more time to talk about each book. But since it's already the end of the month and I'm taking next week off for Christmas, I'm doing them all today. So hopefully this video isn't 20 minutes long. I'll try to be quick. And I do want to clarify that this is not necessarily a best of list. This is a Kayla's top 10 favorite books that she read this year that may or may not have been published this year list, which is a bit of a mouthful, so we're calling it a top 10. Number 10 on this list is September Girls by Bennett Madison. This is a very good example of a book that I would not normally pick up just given the summary. I read this book strictly on the recommendations of some people that I trust, and they were not wrong. I'm going to be straight up with you about this. So September Girls reads very much like a contemporary fairy tale, and because of that, I kind of don't know how to summarize it. Like I said, the summary in the book didn't do anything to entice me, which is just personal preference, but I don't know how to describe it in a way that would entice you, so I'm just going to tell you how I felt about it. It was very beautiful and very dreamy and had very interesting things to say about feminism and society and cultural expectations of women and men and the interactions between women and men all through this kind of magical realism lens. And yes, the story is compelling, the characters are compelling, the setting is just gorgeous and perfect and lush and everything you could want, but for me, what makes this book super interesting is the themes. It's the things that it has to say about the wider context. Number 9 is Just One Day by Gail Forman. I borrowed this one from a friend and adored it, utterly devoured this book, and gave it back. Then I really wanted one of my other friends to read it, so I bought my own copy and lent it to her. Then she moved to Ohio and I never got my book back, so I bought it again. So I bought this book twice. That's how much I love it. It's one of the best examples of contemporary romance I've ever read. And I'm honestly not entirely sure what it was about this book that enthralled me so much. But I mean, I read it in one sitting, which is not wholly unusual for me, but it is for a contemporary book. So the story is that Allison is on a school trip in Europe and she meets a boy and they go to Paris together for just one day. They sneak away and spend one day together in Paris. And so this book follows the story of that day and then what happens to Allison after that day. So I don't know if it was just the characters or this European setting or this really, really romantic kind of atypical premise for a romance that sucked me in so much, but I could not stop. Number 8 on this list is The Diviners by Libba Bray, which I'm only going to hold up for a second because it's really heavy, because see, very big. Yay for lots of words. This one I actually read. I think this was the very first book I read of this year back in January. This is the first in a series. It's a paranormal set in 1920s New York, which immediately I'm sold. It's incredibly creepy, terrifying in the best sort of way, but so much more than that too. This is an excellent example of an ensemble cast. The cast just kept growing and growing and growing as I was reading. We kept getting more points of view and more points of view, and every single one of them I didn't want to leave, and anytime a section would end I'd be like, no, come back, I love that character, and then I would immediately get sucked into the next section. Obviously the setting is really enjoyable. It's 1920s New York, but we get to see it from, again, multiple viewpoints and multiple kinds of dimensions of what was happening during this. So we get one of the Ziegler girls. And we get Evie, who's new to town and really excited about this scene, this party scene, this lifestyle. And we get some characters who are kind of lower in position and from a different side of town. And we see how all these characters sort of come together in solving this mystery and solving these murders. There's a string of murders that are happening. It's distressingly romantic and beautiful and alive. It feels alive, which I feel like any book set in the 1920s should. Number 7 on this list is The Dream Thieves by Maggie Stiefvater. This is another paranormal series. This is actually the second book in the series, though. The Raven Boys was the first. It came out last year, and it was one of my top 10 of last year as well. This book absolutely exceeded my expectations, and like I said, The Raven Boys was one of my top 10 of last year. I adored it to pieces, and this one, I think Maggie even just raised her game, and I'm really excited for the next one in the series. Part of what I really loved about this book was the unexpected kind of protagonist switch that we got. So the first book, The Raven Boys, was very much Blue's story. She was the daughter of a psychic who'd been told her entire life that she would kiss her true love and kill him. So that's cheery. This one, we get to follow Ronan and his story and his past and his background and family and secrets and fears and everything. Ronan we didn't get to see too much of in the first book. We saw him, but he wasn't he wasn't the center of that story the way that he's the center of this story. And I really appreciated getting to expand that universe and see a little more of these characters' lives in a way that we didn't in the first one. Number 6 on this list is actually the only adult book. All the others have been young adult so far, and we've got more of that coming up, plus a middle grade, but this one is an adult fantasy. This is Vicious by V.E. Schwab. This is one of the best superpower stories I've ever read or enjoyed in general. Not just books, but in terms of movies and comics and TV shows. And I say superpower because it's very much not a superhero, supervillain story, even though it's kind of set up that way, but it subverts a lot of those tropes and a lot of those expectations about these characters, which is one of the things I absolutely adored about this. Vicious is the story of two friends turned arch nemeses. Victor and Eli were besties in college, and after they figured out how to get superpowers, things kind of went south, one could say. They had a pretty epic falling out. And Vicious takes place both in the past, like pre them finding out that they have powers and showing how that happened, as well as in the present 10 years later. And one of the things I loved about this book was the use of bouncing back and forth in the narrative, and it was really effective. Very difficult to pull off, but very effective in this story. I also loved the secondary characters, so it's very much Victor and Eli's story, but there are two sisters who come into play as well, and they are incredible. They are some of the best, most fully drawn secondary characters I've ever seen. Highly recommended. As are all of these. I don't know why I keep saying that. I don't know how to end each of these little segments other than read it. Read it. I'm really excited about this one. This one is number 5. It is The Girl Who Soared Over Fairyland and Split the Moon in Two by Catherine M. Valente. This is the third in the Fairyland series, which the first is The Girl Who Circumnavigated Fairyland in a Ship of Her Own Making, which is one of my all-time favorite titles ever. See my titles video. Anyways, this is a middle grade fantasy, and it is astounding. Okay, so if I were to have a daughter right now, just, I don't know, magically, I guess, I would name her September after the protagonist in these books. I'm not even kidding. That would happen. That is how much I love these books and how much I love these characters and this setting and this world and the language in these books and the things it has to say about childhood and adulthood and friendship and bravery and curiosity and adventure and home and family and etc. I could seriously talk about these books all of next year and be fine with it. So I don't even know if I have anything else to say. Just the descriptions and the characterization and the plotting it's all incredible. It's all incredible. I'm starting to question why I didn't put this higher on this list. Number 4 is The Waking Dark by Robin Wasserman, which I also talked about in my titles video, coincidentally. This is a young adult horror that has been likened to Stephen King, and actually Robin Wasserman, I believe, has said that this is basically her love letter to Stephen King, and you can tell. The Waking Dark begins by showing the Killing Day, which is a day in the town of Oleander, Kansas, where 5 different people went on murdering sprees, and 12 people ended up dying. There were only 5 survivors, and it follows what happened that day and then what happened after that day in the town, specifically to those 5 survivors. This book is terrifying, and it's one of the reasons that I've decided that I actually do like horror after a lifetime of shunning it with everything I had, but it serves a purpose. This book is about more than the violence. It's about the root of violence and the people who commit violence and the people who have violence committed unto them. It's about religion, and it's about the role of leadership in a town and how that gets distributed and who has power and who should have power and how that power should be wielded. And it's about family, and it's about betrayal and love. And I keep doing this. I keep just listing things that the book is about, but without actually telling you anything about the plot. But that's because themes and ideas speak to me a lot more than a plot of a story typically will. And I think a good plot serves the theme. The number 3 book I don't actually have to show you because it's out on loan, so hopefully I can figure out how to put a picture of the cover here, but you've probably seen it. It was one of the most talked about books of the year. Eleanor and Park by Rainbow Rowell. Eleanor and Park stuck with me in a way that few books have. That book I put down and I literally carried it around with me the next day because I just needed it with me. I just needed it close to me in case I wanted to look at it or just hold it or read it again or whatever. Which sounds really creepy now that I say it, but it's not. It's all because of love. It is definitely a romance between Eleanor and Park, who you might have guessed are the protagonists. It's dual point of view, and it is utterly utterly beautiful, heartbreaking, and hopeful, which is a really interesting combination. A lot of people have said that the ending of this crushed them, and I get that, but the ending to me has always felt really hopeful, if bittersweet. And I mean, a lot of people have talked about how this book is very interesting because of all the pop culture references from the 80s and like, you know, the role that comics play and music play in this relationship, and all of that is true. And it does add several interesting layers of depth to their relationship and to the blossoming of their relationship. But for me, it's just always going to boil down to Eleanor and to Park and to their relationship and their interactions and their love for one another. And I am just hearts in my eyes forever. I love this book. Number 2 is Rose Under Fire by Elizabeth Wein, which is the companion novel to Codename Verity, which was absolutely my number 1 read of last year, hands down. And just because this is number 2 doesn't mean I loved it any less than Codename Verity. That's not what that means. This was just as compelling and just as devastating as Codename Verity was, in a very different kind of way. Rose Under Fire follows Rose, who's a young American pilot working for the British Air Force during World War II. And she ends up, through a series of unfortunate events, crash landing in Germany and being taken to a concentration camp for female prisoners. It is just as harrowing and just as heartbreaking and devastating as it sounds like it would be, but I don't want to let that deter you, because this book is also, in a way, kind of hopeful at the end, eventually. I actually, I still have trouble talking about this book because it affected me so much, and I am not one that cries at books, and just want to point that out. Like, I don't tend to cry at books. I cried at The Fault in Our Stars. I cried at Codename Verity. That's about it. I didn't cry at Rose Under Fire. Maybe one spot, but this wasn't a book that made me tearful. It made me ache. Like, very deep down ache. I felt empty afterwards while simultaneously feeling filled up. This is a cathartic book. It is not one that you read lightly, and it's not one that is going to necessarily be like fun to read, but I think it's important, and I think it's beautiful, and I think you get so much out of reading this book. Again, I'm not doing it justice because I can't do it justice, and words are failing me, but you should read it, seriously. My number 1 book of the year is heavy. It's Quintana of Charon by Melina Marchetta, which is the 3rd in the Lumatere Chronicles series. This is a series of young adult high fantasy. And yes, the world building is very good. It may not be the best I've ever read, but it is very much up there. It's excellent. But what really gets me with these books are the characters. They are just supremely well done. And every single one of those characters is so real and full, and I know them. Like, I finished these books and I felt like I knew every single one of them. And not only are the characters really interesting, but the relationships are really interesting. The characters would be compelling on their own, and they are, but when you put them together and see how they all interact and all the complicated, fraught relationships that are existing within this world, it's astounding, truly. Excellent. Really, really good. I just don't even have words. All I have are superlatives. I'm just going to sit here saying fabulous, wonderful, great, love it, and not add anything substantial. I'm not going to tell you much plotty stuff because this is the 3rd book, and it'll A, be spoilers, and B, won't make any sense. So I would encourage you to look up Finnegan of the Rock, which is the 1st book, and start there. Obviously, this is not a series you can jump in the middle of, but just read them. Just read them so that I can have somebody else to talk to about them, because these aren't as popular as they should be. Everybody should have read these books, and they haven't. So I'm going to need all of you to read them and then get back to me so we can talk about it, because I have a lot of feelings. I should never make lists again. I'm really bad at them, apparently. Whatever. I like talking about books. So the takeaway is you should read all of the books on this list because they're all incredible. And all the series that are on this list, because there are a few that were the 2nd or 3rd books in the series, read those. Read everything. I would not steer you wrong. So I hope you find something useful. It is the holiday season. Maybe you're going to get a gift card or something, or maybe you still need to write that list for, good old Santa. Maybe put one of these books on there. I'm just saying, it wouldn't be a bad idea. Okay, cool. So, thank you all for being with me since I've started these vlogs a few months ago. I've thoroughly enjoyed them, and again, I will be gone next week for Christmas. I hope you all have happy holidays, and I will see you in the new year.